Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Contra, brought to us by Konami. When people talk about the best or their favorite NES games of all time, it's usually not far down the list for many that Contra ends up being mentioned. However, growing up for me, I didn't own Contra back on the NES and didn't get a copy of the game till many years later. The first Contra game that I became familiar with was Contra Hardcore for the Sega Genesis. So because of this, my nostalgia isn't quite as high for Contra, and thus my skill level for Contra has never really been all that great, and why it's taken me so many years and so many requests to finally play through Contra for a video. But anyway guys, here we go with Contra for the NES. If you're familiar with the North American version, which I'm sure most of you are, it doesn't actually have any kind of story that really plays out throughout the course of the game itself, with only a brief blurb at the end. Though the Japanese version of the game actually did feature a full story and cutscenes, as well as the European version is a very different game altogether. Contra, of course, is one of the most popular running gun games of all time, so a lot of what we're going to be doing, of course, is running and gunning. Consistently firing, using all the directions given to us in order to take out enemies, as well as of course pick up and use the various power-ups. I will be using a large majority of the spread shot, even though I ended up skipping the first one. I can get one a little bit later on. I will also be picking up some of the rapid fire as well in order to try to have a better chance of taking out some of the enemies. Right here from this machine, or whatever it's supposed to be in the wall itself, I'm able to pick up the spread shot, and then you also have a couple more power-ups throughout the course of the level. You can pretty much get whatever gun you would like throughout the course of this first stage, so you can have it going into the boss. While spread shot and machine gun are my favorite of the guns, laser and fire are ones that I usually don't really end up using. For this boss, I start off by staying on that middle platform to take out the two upper cannons, and then go to this lower platform and duck down and keep firing because the cannon to my left will not be able to hit me, and I'm able to keep delivering shots until the boss is defeated. The second level is one of the more interesting just concepts that the game had, which was these base levels where it changes the whole perspective on you. Traveling from room to room, and you have to hit the switches or buttons on the walls by destroying them while dealing with the various different enemies. You can't move forward until you're able to destroy those buttons so that the electrical field in front of you ends up dissipating. A lot of the rooms you don't even have to really move at all in order to hit them, or even bother taking out the other cannons that are also in the room trying to fire at you. Here is a little bit more tricky of a room because you'll have to watch out for the barrels on the ground as well as the cannon above. Nicely timed jumps will allow you though to bypass everything and not end up getting hit. For this room you can actually just keep on firing, you can jump if you want to, or duck underneath the cannon fire. Just keep repeating these jumps in nice timed fashion, and it's usually pretty easy to take it out and move on to the boss of base 1. Now there's a lot of fire coming immediately at you, and your goal is to hit the glowing, flashing buttons, and you don't have to really take out the cannons if you don't want to, but doing so of course will definitely help. Once you destroy all the main buttons, the machine itself will open up at the top, firing out these big giant circles that will try to track you and chase you down. You can destroy them using the fire and use that to your advantage to keep on firing upwards at it in order to keep hitting the thing at the top while also destroying the fire so that it's not able to of course make contact with you. Next up is the Waterfall, which has you going from down to up instead of from left to right. It's the only level like this in the game. Doing so the whole time though, you have to be careful because enemies can kind of pop out of nowhere from the left and right side, as well as cannons getting on screen. This was always a tricky level for me when I first started to play Contra, just because a lot of the bullets blend in so well with the waterfall in the background, making it relatively difficult at times to see where bullets were coming from for me to be able to dodge them. These moving platforms are also a little bit annoying because you're trying to move quickly to try to get away from cannons without having to deal with them too much. If you want to go a little bit slower, of course you can and take out everything along the way, but one of the fun things about Contra is trying to keep the momentum up and keep on moving through, blasting enemies as you go. Sometimes though, you will need to stop, like right here I always take out this cannon to the left because of the next ones that end up popping out just a few seconds later, and I always find it to be too crowded with the fire if I don't end up taking out that cannon. Also, if you're unfamiliar, if you end up falling into any of the areas below you, the screen doesn't scroll back down. You end up losing a life, which is always an obnoxious death. At the top, we fight the giant alien menace, who has two giant arms that pop out on the left and right side that we have to deal with first, that also fires out projectiles. You can't destroy the projectiles, but they're relatively easy to dodge. Then the mouth of the alien itself will open up, firing a 3-shot spread shot, which is also relatively easy to dodge, but when you have all the fire from both arms as well as the mouth, it can be a little bit challenging to dodge. Take out the arms first and then start blasting at the mouth. If you're staying right here, you can keep jumping up in the air and keep on firing at the mouth as long as you have spread shot. If you have your other gun, you may have to move a little bit or adjust a bit so that you'll be able to hit it, but it's a relatively easy fight once you get it down to just the mouth. Following that up immediately is the second base level, level 4. Here is more of the same, though it's definitely a bit more challenging. Even the very first room puts up a challenge. The second room has 4 buttons, and you actually have to duck down and squat in order to be able to hit everything against the wall while also dealing with these enemies. Though a relatively easy room since there aren't any other cannons in the wall itself. Right after that, though, you're followed up by one that does have one of those cannons at the top. Some nicely timed jumps will allow you to easily keep firing at the things and expose the buttons or the machines or whatever they're supposed to be so that you can keep firing at them. The next room, you can just duck underneath and you will avoid all the fire from the middle cannon so you don't have to bother with it, as well as be able to easily take out the 2 buttons below. Next up, there's a cannon in the middle, which I always start off by taking out first because it takes a few seconds for the buttons to be exposed, and this way you'll have a much easier time easily taking it out. Anytime you see the R power up, be sure to pick it up as it allows you to fire your weapon more quickly. The next room has a bunch of those barrels that roll towards you, which is really tough to dodge as far as the timing it takes in order to jump while you're also dealing with other bullets. Honestly, the barrels are more deadly to me half the time than the cannons or the enemies that are also in the same room. After that room, we have one more room where we have a big button in the middle, lots of cannons, but you can actually stay in the middle and just do little short jumps like we've been doing in some of the other rooms with big cannons at the top, and keep firing at that middle thing until it's done. And now we move on to the boss chamber, which is a similar boss in a lot of ways, but it only has one regular cannon. But there's also other enemies and soldiers that end up spawning and trying to attack you. You have red ones and blue ones, with blue ones trying to jump towards you as red ones also trying to fire at you. After destroying those 3 pieces of the machine, you will then have to face off with the main portion of it at the top. It splits off into 2 kind of like mirage-esque forms of itself, and each time that it does, it ends up firing out homing shots on you. They're a little bit tough to dodge, but can be taken out using your fire, so use that to your advantage to hit that consistently. Just mainly keep an eye on it. Thankfully, the bullets are relatively easy to see because they are kind of flashing and they stand out a little bit from the background, but make sure you keep firing and taking those out, and the boss itself should go down in no time. Level number 5 is potentially my favorite just because it is the snow-themed level. I'm a big fan of snow-themed levels in games. The annoying part, though, is these cannon guys. They are all over the place, and throughout the course of practicing the game, I pretty much had to memorize where each one of these ones were, so that I'd be able to stop on a dime and be able to fire at them. As soon as you get on screen with one of the stagnant cannon guys, they just immediately start firing large bullets, so you have to duck or jump right away. Ducking is more optimal because you won't accidentally go up to a platform above and run into another enemy, or when you end up landing, there may be another bullet coming directly at you, in which case you just have to keep jumping. Right here is the only time in the game you end up getting the Falcon symbol or whatever, which destroys all enemies currently on screen. It doesn't really do anything for you because there's really not that many enemies on screen at that point, but it's just one of those interesting items you can get in the game. There's 2 of these tanks in the game, and usually I like to hang off on the left wall if I have my spread shot. Either way, with my normal cannon, I can still jump up and fire at it, and this will allow me to jump over a large portion of the bullets or stay on the ground and let some of the bullets go overhead. Right after destroying it, though, there's a couple of regular enemies that may sometimes spawn, as a lot of like the kind of just random running around one-shot enemies, they kind of spawn weirdly. They can sometimes all spawn together, they kind of are a little bit more spontaneous than a lot of the other enemies that usually take multiple shots, like cannons, or there's guys with the turrets, or whatever it may be. So always be prepared for a random soldier to just kind of run at you out of nowhere. After a section with a few random enemies, as well as a lot of those grenades, canisters, or whatever coming from the background throwing at you. When you make it to this platform, be careful when moving along, because there are those grenades coming at you, as well as one of those turret cannon guys. Right after that, though, as the screen goes to just a solid black again, we are at the boss for the level. Now, this is a spaceship that not only fires at you, but also spawns little tiny machines that come at you as well. Keep firing upwards at it. You can actually destroy the regular fire from it, as well as, of course, the little UFO-esque robots that are going around. Overall, a relatively easy boss for this far into the game. Energy Zone is the 6th level of the game, and we have 3 levels left. Things definitely start to get more intense with just the amount of enemies and some of the perils you'll have to deal with. There's more of those standing turret cannon guys, which I just absolutely love from the previous stage, and of course they are back in droves through the course of this stage. Also in here is these extremely, and I mean ungodly annoying fire that comes out of broken pipes. As you can see, you can clearly see where they're going to come from. They don't usually spawn until you get close. There's also the flame kind of machines on the walls that you have to deal with, so a lot of the areas throughout the course of this level you have to move slowly through. Wait for the timing, jump up. Don't accidentally duck and jump down to a lower platform until all fire around you has dissipated, because even though you're doing a jumpwards down, like right here, you end up standing up for that brief second when you do jump down and can easily land into the turret of fire. So really take your time. It's worth it to go slow, at least during this portion, because these flames are pretty annoying. During this section, there's a couple of those cannon turret guys. Take out the ones in the middle, and then go along the middle path. There's another cannon right away, but being in the middle, you can easily duck and get away from his fire and take him out. Right after that, though, running just a little bit farther, is the boss for the level, which is this big, giant alien guy. Fire a bunch of shots at him. He'll usually either fire his little projectiles at you, or he'll just jump in the air. Whenever he's running towards you, you have to do a big leap over him, which is a little bit dangerous because he can sometimes jump and such, but it's your only way that you're going to be able to take him out. If you have a spread shot, you can easily do a lot of damage to him, but even with your normal fire, just keep consistent shots like always for any of the bosses, and time those jumps so that you can avoid running into him. Level number 7 is the Hangar, and it's kind of a factory type theme to it here, as you have these spike pressors that keep coming down, and you have to figure out the pattern for each one, the timing for each one, before progressing forward, some of which are a lot more tougher to dodge as well as judge when they're going to be coming down. There's also the excessive use of these big spike walls. They pop out, and they pop out usually when you're right in front of them, just a step or so away, to try to trick you and have you run directly into them if you're moving too fast. There's also the random little minecarts that are throughout the area that you can kind of ride on and go with, but honestly it's best just to jump off of most of them unless there's nothing that's going to be coming your way. Like this one right here is pretty much the only one that you're going to want to ride for any period of time, as most of the other ones are going to lead you right into pressers, and because of these timing issues with these things kind of to crush you and spike you to death, it can be really a nuisance to even try and attempt to ride on those minecarts. After a series of more spike walls, we come here where you'll have to move very slowly. There's a spike wall at the very end that thankfully pops up a few of the things away so that you'll be able to hit it. Then, right afterwards, you'll fire at a few of those turret guys in a row. Thankfully, we're almost to the end, but there's a lot of turrets here, which unfortunately, I end up finally getting a hit from one of them and end up losing a life. So, I go into this boss with only the default weapon, which is a little bit tough. Usually I stand a little bit away from it at first. They fire out the grenades that explode in the spread shot above you, and I wait until I have to absolutely move before I get closer. If you get really close, when the door opens up, the other enemies will end up spawning on the other side, which is kind of weird as they're supposed to come from that open door, but that's what ends up happening. You can just keep firing up at what you need to hit in order to destroy the boss, and the other enemies just turn around briefly in order to hit them. The final level of the game is the alien lair. Right near the beginning, you're able to get a couple of power-ups. The more important one, though, is the letter B here because it gives you invulnerability for a period of time, which will allow you to bypass the giant alien head here. Since you're flashing, you're invincible, you're not going to be able to get hit, and just keep firing up at the alien and easily destroy it, and then move on past before it ends up running out, even if you have the weakest weapon like I do at the moment. From that point on, though, you have all the little alien pods in the ceilings and the floors, and the little things that they pop out will end up kind of like chasing you down after they're on screen for a period of time. Once I get my spread shot back, I'm a little bit more safe as I'm able to kind of run and shoot at them as I'm moving, and if you move quick enough, you can get these things off screen so that they're unable to have enough time on screen in order to chase you down, but still be very careful and cautious of them as you're running through, as the level is not very long before we end up making it to the final boss. Be sure to take out this pod right here before you end up making it to the boss itself. It just makes things a little bit easier. For the boss itself, though, as of course you can probably tell, you have to hit the heart in the center, but you have the two sets of pods on the floor and ceiling spawning out the little aliens that try to run towards you. The one on the ground, very easy to hit, just keep firing them every time you land, and the ones above, only some of them will fly down towards you and try to hit you. If you keep firing like I am, eventually you'll destroy the ones on the ground, sometimes before the heart's destroyed, but either way, once the heart's defeated, you can sit back and enjoy the ending, the Contra. So there you have it, the original Contra for NES. After all the years, I've been kind of slowly working on Contra, trying to get a little bit better. Even though this run is far from perfect, I am relatively satisfied with it. I didn't grow up with Contra. I've never been the biggest Contra fan out there, though I definitely enjoy the series overall. I just liked so many other retro games over the years. I played so many other ones consistently more often. And the one thing that's fun with Contra, of course, is multiplayer, but I've always felt like if I'm really concentrating, I have a harder time playing the game multiplayer than I do single player, because I just end up getting distracted with my friend's fire and trying to go over everything as well. I'm just proud to know that nowadays I can say that I can beat Contra with relatively low amount of lives lost. I don't need the Konami code and the 10 lives, and don't use any continues either. So in the end, though, I'm pretty satisfied with my run here of Contra. At the presented by Konami screen at the end, though, after a few seconds, it'll then go back to the first level, and you can continue with the same amount of lives as well as the score that you had, and just see how high of a score you can end up racking up. But with that, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up or commenting down below. If you're interested in seeing some more playthroughs, I recently did Taboo, The Sixth Sense for the NES, one of the oddest games for sure ever, and especially for NES, as well as I also recently did a play it through for Sonic 2 XL, a ROM hack of Sonic 2 that actually makes Sonic fatter the amount of rings he collects, and getting too fat ends up making him lose a life. I also, of course, need to thank all the members of my Patreon. Without your guys' continued support, I wouldn't be able to keep doing what I'm doing. If you'd like to help out, just click that little Patreon button. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.